So when I'm traveling and when I'm making social media content and any content in general on the road, I am very time poor. So I don't have a lot of time to sit down and spend hours on the edit. So in this video, I'm going to show you how to quickly get your footage into DaVinci, make your selects, achieve a film look, and get it exported fast. And finally, at the end of the video, I'm going to give you a free download to 10x your workflow and speed up all your color grading. First thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to open up the color page. I'm going to go up here and select timeline, Option S to add a node, and then I'll go to my gallery and then I'll drag this onto the timeline. So this is my starting node tree for all my color grades. So basically I've got my CST in, my CST out, my film emulation on the end, my basic corrections here, and my HSL, saturation, and split toning here. What I'll do is I'll drag it straight onto the timeline. It'll copy it across all the clips. So now as I go through the footage, I can review, I can look at my footage with a basic look, a basic correction on it. And why do I do this? Well, it makes it more interesting to actually go through and make selects on the footage when you've got color, when you've got saturation, when you've got contrast on your clips. What I'll do is I'll put the node tree as a download for you so you can just jump in, download the node tree, add it to DaVinci Resolve, and you've got the whole node tree. Now, I do ask one thing, if you do download it, just drop me a comment on the bottom of this video because it'll allow this video to reach other creators so they can also download it too. That's all I ask is drop a comment, and there also will be a color grading cheat sheet. So if you're not familiar with color space transforms and converting log footage into Rec 709, DaVinci Wide Gamut, all of that stuff, it's all there. Now I can actually start going through and making selects on my footage in the timeline. So how do I do that? So I've got my down arrow key, and that allows me to jump between clips. And then I've got my M, which is my marker. So I'll do this in real time so you can kind of see it and how fast the workflow actually is. What I will do next is I'll go up here to timeline, select clips by marker color, and I'll just press blue. I'll just press Option, I'll drag them up. And then what I'll do is I'll drag all of those clips to the right. Now, if I want to select everything to the right of the playhead, I'll just press Option E, and then I'll press Command D. Now, you can do this in either order, but if I am starting to trim the clips, what I'll do is I'll just start to play forward. So I'll press 2 to play. Now, you can see at the start of that clip, it shakes a little bit. So I'll just delete that starting point, and then I'll let it play through to where I'm happy with it. Let's say about there. Then I'll press P, ripple delete to the right, and now I've got my piece of usable footage here. Now the next thing I'll do is I'll hit stabilize, I'll go down here camera lock and stabilize it. So it'll punch in a little bit to crop in so it can stabilize as if it's on a tripod, and now we've got a much more stable piece of footage here. Even though I shot it handheld, it looks very stable. And the last thing, I'll just zoom in a little bit, I'll just rotate it so it looks straight. Now that's a usable piece of footage. I'd happily export that and use it in a video, or post it as a carousel on Instagram, or even chop it up further and put it into a bit of an edit. You can press Shift 6 to get back into the color page. So now if I go back to timeline here, and if I just delete that, and then I'll go to the clip level, recopy the node tree onto the clip level. Now what I'll do is I'll start going in and refining the look. We've got exposure here. So this is the exposure, white balance, and contrast nodes. And what I'll do is I can start adjusting the exposure on the clip to get it to where I'm happy with. So let's put it there, I'll bring the highlights down, and we can bring it up a little bit. So that's before and after. So you can see I've just brought down the exposure, and I'll go to my white balance here. This is a linear node. So if I go to gamma, it's already selected as linear for you. So that means I'll just change my red, green, and blue channels in a linear space. So if we look at the waveform, we can see the red and the greens are sitting a little bit higher than the blues. So I'll just bring down the reds a touch, bring down the greens a touch, bring up the blues a touch, and let's see where we're at here. So let's see before and after. If I zoom in, before and after, very subtle change. It's like a little bit more green there, a little bit more less green, a bit more red. So I've warmed it up slightly. Let me just pull down a bit. Yeah, there we go. I kind of want it there. Very subtle changes, but I can see I've cooled it down slightly, meaning I've brought those blues up and brought the red and greens down. So that's the white balance. And then I'll go to my contrast here. Contrast will start to give me more of a nice look on the image, and I'll just bring that up. So usually what I'll do is I'll bring the gain up, bring the lift down, and another way we can adjust contrast is by using our curves. I've locked in my middle gray point here, so I can actually just start to bring contrast in without affecting those mid gray regions. That would be things like skid tones, and generally most of your image lives in the mid gray region. Your highlights and your shadows is what you want to adjust, and then I'll just bring it down. So let me just roll off those highlights a bit. Now that's before and after. Before and after. So now you can see we've got more saturation. I'll look at my vector scope. Before, you can see I haven't touched saturation, but when I add contrast, it pushes, you can see the saturation, you can see the vector scope getting pushed out, meaning this is before, less saturation. Add your contrast, more saturation. So what does that tell us? It tells us when we add contrast, we also add saturation. So keep that in mind, because you don't want to overdo it on the saturation side. Now we will go in and adjust our saturation after, but now that's where we're sitting. And you can see we're pushing out to the yellows here on the vector and the blues. So we've got a nice split between yellow and blue here in this shot, but there's still a little bit more work to do. So that leads us into the next stage, which will be our saturation. So if I just open up effects, I've got this DCTL, which I will also have in the download. You can just download it. And basically this allows me to control saturation in a nicer way. And let me just bring it down. So that's before, and then that's after. Before, after. You can see I've just taken the edge off that saturation, brought it down. We still have a split between those yellows, oranges, and blues. You got the blue here, we've got the orange and the bread and the wood. So that's looking good. And then I'll go into my HSL. The HSL is where I'll start to refine my look and get this vector scope sitting where I want it to sit. So what do I mean by that? Well, let me just open it up. And this is another DCTL, which will be linked as well for you. You can download it. And I just find this a much easier way to adjust color than using the curves here. So what am I looking at? I'm looking at my reds and yellows and oranges. So if I just go to my red hue here, and if I keep an eye on the vector scope, you can see as I pull the red to the right, you can see that vector scope moving towards the red channel. So that's fine. I'll just pull it across slightly. And then if I push up the saturation, you can see it's also moving up. It's getting more saturated. And if I pull the red value down, you can see that it's kind of bringing the saturation down, but it's kind of pulling it around to the orange, which is what I want, because we've got some bread, we've got some wood. I want it to be that sort of, orangey, warm orangey color. And then I've got my yellow here. So if I push the yellow, let me see what's happening. So I like when it gets a little bit red, then I'll pull the saturation down. Now you can see what's happening here. If I go before, you can see how my vector scope is pushing out. It's kind of curving around to the yellow. I'm just bringing it back around towards those reds, so it lines up with the blue and the cyan there. So this is after, before, and after. You can see it's come around like that. And let me just pull this down. Let me see. Maybe a little bit. I don't want to bring it around too much. I do want to keep a little bit of orange in there, not too much red. So that's where the saturation comes in. And then what I'll do next is I'll go to the blues, and I'll see if I start adjusting this blue hue, you can see as I pull it to the left, it gets more saturated, and it's mostly in this pot and then up here as well. That's where the blue is coming from. Let me just pull the cyan saturation down. So I'll just desaturate the cyan. And let me just go back to the blue saturation. There we go. Now you can see we're pulling down the saturation, and now we are adjusting the blue hue slightly. So I just want to get it to a point. What I'm doing here is I'm looking at the blues in the pot, and I'm also looking at the vector scope. So I'm kind of glancing back and forth between them to see what looks good. I think there looks good, and we've still got that nice split between the oranges and those blues. So I'll do before, keep an eye on the vector scope, after. So I've tightened up the vector scope, and I've desaturated. And if you look at the image, that's before and that's after. And I'm actually pretty happy with that. So then I'll go to my split tone. This is just a drag and drop effect that's built into DaVinci. What we'll do here is, if I push up the strength, you can see we're getting more saturated and we're getting more separation in those oranges and blues. Pull it down, pull it up. So I'll just keep an eye on the vector scope while I'm doing this and the image. So I don't want to overdo it, but I do want a bit more of a split. See, so that's before and after, before and after. And then if I look at the pivot here and I look at the vector, you can see it's kind of moving around a certain point. Now, where do I want it to live? I want a bit of saturation in there. And then let's see the hue angle. Actually, so the pivot, before and after, before and after. Now we've pushed that saturation up on those yellows. So what I'll do then is I'll go back into my saturator and just bring it down a touch. So we'll go back to our split zone. And then if I look at the hue angle, now I'll just keep an eye, I'll just look at the image as I'm adjusting this and I'll sort of see where do I want it to live? I want it to be there. So actually not much change at all, 6.5. So that's before and then that's after. Before and after. And then I'll go to my vignette and then I'll just see where my vignette's sitting. Now I'll just bring it out a little bit, feather it, and then I'll go here, shift forward space to bring this to full screen. And then I'll pull down this to introduce that subtle vignette. Cool. So that is that image done. So generally I would just fly through that. I'd be doing it very quickly. Obviously I'm explaining it in the video, so I'm taking my time. But when I'm just sort of locked in, I've got music on and I'm just cracking through each of the clips, that's what I'll be doing. So then as I go through, so let's say I'm pretty much happy with that. And this is the film emulation look on the end. So if I just open up this node, we've got our color space transform node. You can see we're going into Rec 709. This one is another color space transform. We're taking our Rec 709 and we're putting it into Cineon film log. And then we're applying our LUT, which is our film Rec 709 codec 2383D60. And then what I'll do is I'll compound them. I'll right click both of them, create a compound node, and that's the film look. So I can press R, codec, and then that's it saved. Now, why did I compound it? It's because I can actually go in here and I can reduce the strength of that film emulation look. So if I don't want it full intensity, I can just go in, I can adjust it, and then I can Command D before, after, before, and after. So I like that look. It looks pretty good. So that's my pretty basic node structure. But I like to keep it simple so I can just get through the grading fast. Like I said, I don't have much time when I'm traveling. So what I'll do next is, there's two ways you can do this. I could go through, I can select all of the selects, and then I can just middle mouse click onto that clip that we've just worked on. And it's going to apply the node tree to every single piece of footage. It's going to be that exact look that we just created here. So it's going to work on some of the clips, but it's not going to work on all of the clips. So if I start to go through and have a look, you can see we're getting a nice effect on a few of them. Looking good. These ones are really nice. So let's say we take this one. So now as I work through, I'll do the exact same thing on every clip. I'll just go in. What I actually do sometimes is I turn off the film look, and then I turn off the saturation, HSL, split tone, and vignette. And I kind of just see where we're at from a exposure, contrast, and white balance. So let me see, that's before and that's after. Before, after. So if I just take my parade here, or even my waveform, doesn't really matter. This shot, it's a little bit under. So what I'll do is I'll just go in, I'll just up the gain, add a bit of brightness, pull those highlights down a touch, just on the trees, they were just getting a bit hot, and bring it up. So let me see about there. So before, after. So I'm a bit happier with that. A bit brighter, a bit more exposed correctly. And then what I'll do is I'll come down to contrast and I'll just add in my contrast. So now you can see that we're getting a nice image here. And honestly, the colors in Soul in autumn are just fantastic. Like these autumn, that's so nice to color grade. You get these beautiful reds, these yellows, oranges. Look at this purple, all the colors. So let me just look at my parade here. Blue's a bit high. You can obviously see we've got blue sky, so that's why we're pushing up here. So that's fine. Let me just adjust my red channel. Let me see the greens. So I'm just kind of looking at the image, but I'm also looking at the scopes to see how they're moving. And I'll just do Command D, that's before and after. If I just zoom in to the wall here, before and then after, before. It's a very subtle change, but it's just a little bit blue, a little bit more blue. That's good. So that image, then I'll turn everything back on. So I'll turn on the film emulation, I'll turn on the saturation, the HSL, and I'll have a look. So, okay, now it's a bit intense, that look. So I'll just jump into the Kodak. I'll go here and I'll just pull down the look so it's not so intense. And then I can also go back to my exposure and pull down the gain a little bit. Maybe pull those highlights down a little bit more. Then saturation. Yep, happy with the saturation. HSL, let me just look. I'm pretty happy with that. Let me just look at my vector scope and then let me see the split toning. Yeah, so I'm actually pretty happy. And that's before, that's got the vignette on it. So let me just adjust that one a little bit. Bring it down here and then I'll feather it. And I'll just turn that off. And there we go. So now we've got this beautiful shot of the temple. And so that's pretty much what's happening. So I'll essentially go through every clip and I'll just tweak the exposure, the white balance, the contrast. If you're out shooting and say you're filming a sunset, right? Like let's take this scene here, these mountains on top of the cafe that I was on. All these clips, the light's going to be the same. If you've locked in your white balance when you're filming, you're going to have the same white balance. Generally, your exposure should be set as well. So what you'll have is you'll have about 4 or 5, maybe 6, depends on how many you shot, but you'll have a number of clips and they'll all have same exposure, same white balance. So whenever you bring them into DaVinci and you apply, like let's say I apply the look on this clip and I've corrected the node tree, then I can just apply that to the following clips and they're all going to be very close. They're all going to be looking consistent. It's just a really fast way to grade. So it means I can just punch through so many clips. So there's about 40, 50 clips here. And it just means if I've short on time and I just want to get the edit done, I want to get the footage exported and posted onto social media, or I want to get my edit finished, I can lock in, music on, and I can just pump through a bunch of color grades and get all the footage looking consistent, getting the same look applied, getting everything exposed correctly, getting the colors right, and basically just having really nice, consistent looking footage across the timeline of what I shot. And as I said, I'll drop the node tree into the description below. So just download that. You'll have everything to your fingertips and you can easily just go in and make your adjustments. Now, those color space transforms are transforming S Log3 into DaVinci Wide Gamut. If you're using a different input color space or a different input gamma, so maybe you're using Canon or you're shooting on a different camera, just make sure that you change the input color space. And then if you do want to adjust your film, just show the compound node and then you can just go here. So say you want to go in, you just want to change that look. So you can just go in here, you can just play around, change different looks. And then like, let's say you want the Fuji film. Let's put that on. Then I can just exit the compound and then I can now adjust the intensity of that compound. So that's the node tree, that's the workflow, that's the process. Don't forget to drop a comment below so other creators can find the download the node tree, and also, work faster. Oh, and there's a review in Gumroad. Put a review in there, please, 5 stars or whatever you feel is worth it for the download. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.